Well, my friends, here we are in beautiful Toronto. I wanted to explain why nobody bikes in Toronto, why we have a apparently a 3% rate of cycling, like 3% of commuters use bikes to commute, but we have like a 50% bike ownership rate and like a 60% or something like that of cyclists, of people claiming to be cyclists. And we got this other figure, which is like most people who aren't, most people who have bikes in Toronto would use them more if it was safer. And I just I wanted to drop in this little dose of reality here, in terms of in terms of getting between hoods, because right downtown, in the downtown core, cycling is pretty, like, relatively easy. But there's this barrier in the form of barriers in terms of people, let's say, going to the junction from the annex, or going to, Rockliffe Smythe from the junction, or, going to crossing the Don Valley, or any of this kind of stuff, and it's barriers in the form of this. So this is my little tour of, this is the awful things that you have to go through if you are a cyclist or a pedestrian, or of course a driver, but it's great for drivers because all these places are great for drivers, like this. So this is the tour of if you want to get into or out of Rockliffe Smythe. This is just an example neighborhood. This is your options. Let's say you're going northeast. You can use Rogers. You'll have to go through two completely terrible intersections that don't really work for anybody. There we can see exactly how cyclists react to this intersection. And then you've got to somehow bike over the Rogers Bridge. Sorry, my computer is garbage. I mean, I'm only a cyclist, right? I can't afford a real computer. So you got to choose between a sidewalk that's too narrow to walk your bike on while you're sharing it with other pedestrians, too narrow to safely ride your bike because you're not going to be able to get fast enough to be stable, or you want to share this lane with these people. They have absolutely zero candy for you, by the way. Zero candy. So let's see, there's Rogers. Certainly there's got to be a good, cyclist friendly detour so you don't have to take Rogers. Let's see, you're going a little bit more to the northeast. You can always use Black Creek Drive if you feel like ignoring all the signs next to it that say that you can't walk next to it or bike on it or anywhere around it. And if you want to deal with 50-kilometer-an-hour traffic that's actually 70-kilometer-an-hour traffic, and if you can actually manage to get to this intersection on your bike, that's amazing. You could get to it by taking this Humber Boulevard road right here, which is sketchy as hell. Super narrow, super rough, and drivers take it at about 40 or 50 kilometers an hour. If you can magically find this weird entrance to this side street here, there's this like impossible to find kind of, behind this truck somewhere. There's this this passageway that's not, really on any maps and stuff like that. And if you're a local, you'll find out about this way to get, if you somehow end up here from another hood, then you can get onto this quiet side street and proceed southwest through the hood. But you have to get there somehow. You can't really get there on Weston because it's completely cyclist impassable. You can't use Black Creek, so that basically cinches the neighborhood in all the way up past Weston. Let's say you're going, more north-northeast out of the neighborhood. or coming into the neighborhood from north-northeast? Well, you're not really going to be coming in on Eglinton, except you're going to be cycling out on the sidewalk. Let's see here. What is the next available entrance? This is one of a handful of ways that you can actually go through this track. So if you're going in or out of this neighborhood on its northeast corner, you're in luck, because Ray Road is, it's pretty good. It's pretty good for cyclists. It's nice. Why? Because it's got one lane in each direction that is just barely too narrow to accommodate 2 cars. Wow. The magic of cyclist accessibility. That's the magical formula. That's our special, unique made in Toronto solution. Too narrow for 2 cars. Wow. What a amazing, you can hear the anger in my voice. CTV is doing all these awful reports that it's like the news, they end up saying stuff that affects the way that people treat me on the road, and the way that people treat me on the road is my #1 source of danger. Drivers having an attitude to me is that's what puts me in the hospital. The laws that we have, that's what puts me in the hospital. And the roads that we have. So you're not going to end up coming out on Jane Street unless you want to bike on a super narrow sidewalk in extremely high wind and unshaded sun for the whole length of this thing, and get to it with totally cyclist impassable roads. So let's see, where is the northern boundary of this neighborhood? I was considering it to be sort of Eglinton, so I've gone way past that, but it's basically the only way to safely get in or out of this neighborhood on a bike on the northeast side is all the way up north of Eglinton. That sucks. Using Eglinton is totally sketchy, except there's a bike path that goes west from Jane. This whole square, going east or west through this whole square of area on a bike, is pretty much just sketchy no matter what you do. And you're basically stuck with the sidewalk of Eglinton. It gets a little better up in here. Within the neighborhood, it's not so bad. Once you get into the area, you can take all these awesome neighborhood side streets where drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians all have perfectly good access and can move through, pretty much as quickly as they want to, and don't spend a lot of time waiting at intersections, because it's just normal intersections instead of 5 lanes for nobody and a whole bunch of extra traffic control signals that just end up delaying everyone. Okay, so on the western boundary, we're looking east, by the way. This is why this looks so weird. Google Maps is more awesome than most internet users are prepared to handle. So if this is totally blowing your mind, don't worry. Just, go along with it. We're looking south. So this is south on the northwestern. Oh, nobody knows their cardinal directions either. Learn what north, south, east, and west are, and then come back to this video. So this is on the northwestern side of the hood looking south. It's bounded on the west side by the Humber River. And so getting across the Humber River for people who live in this area, it's a big deal. You can cross along Eglinton, and Eglinton has a beautiful... Oh my god, Eglinton has fallen into the water! Oh no, it's okay. So Eglinton has this beautiful bike route. It's unmarked, of course. It's totally unofficial. And I'm sure it'll be removed, on our city councilor's birthday or something like that. But for now, if you're going in or out of this neighborhood on its northwestern side, you are in luck, because Eglinton will join you up with the Humber Trail, and so for those months where it's not full of snow, you can actually go northwest out of this neighborhood. It's incredible. And you can take this bike path all the way to the airport, which is super cool. Again, in the winter, the snow's not going to be cleared, so you're not going to be able to use it, so cyclists don't cycle in the winter, so people are like, well, nobody bikes in the winter, so let's not clear the snow, so there you go. If you're going out of this hood to the west, you'll have to deal with Scarlet. This is a terrible fucking road for cyclists. It's awful. It's rough, it's terrible. Approaching it is terrible. This whole area here is a big time danger zone. This is a total danger zone. This is the type of spot where you go on the road and drivers will punish you for being there and scream at you to go on the sidewalk. You go on the sidewalk and like drivers who are walking their dogs will get all pissed off at you for being there. So there's you're totally damned if you do, damned if you don't. Of course, the whole western edge of the neighborhood is blocked off by a golf course, which gets practically no use. So you can get to Scarlet Road using, these roads like East, which are great roads. It's awesome. You can go through the Black Creek Trail and get to Scarlet, but once you're on Scarlet, you're 100% screwed. And to get out of this neighborhood on the western side, you have to use Scarlet. There's just nothing you can do. So nobody does. 3%. You can get to the south. There's no, way to get to the river from the western side because it's blocked off with this terrible golf course that nobody uses. But if you want to go to the southwestern side of this area, you're extremely out of luck because you have to use Scarlet or you have to use St. Clair, which is totally impassable as well. And then you have to fight drivers for access to this terrible little bridge. It might look like, well, it's only single lane, so I'll just go in behind one driver and in front of another. But drivers force you to do that about 35 kilometers an hour, and the surface is not smooth enough to accommodate that. So you're completely screwed, and you've got to share your bicycle, your body, and somebody else's body with this tiny little walkway. So this is a definite like pedestrian and cyclist punishment zone. It seems wide enough over here to accommodate a cyclist and a driver, but you go through there, no, it's absolutely terrifying. So yet another intersection that sells cars. Good old St. Clair. It is so consistently useless. I mean, when St. Clair is clear, which is half the time, it's a wonderful cycling road. Because it's total overkill for drivers. They do not need it. It's completely I hate St. Clair. It's such a waste of road. It's just so annoying to pay for road that you're basically not allowed to use. It's like whether it's restricted access roadway that you're not allowed to use technically, or it's just a terribly designed roadway that provokes extremely competitive driving in drivers and puts cyclists in all that crossfire, therefore, completely deterring us. You're still not allowed to use it. Drivers don't allow me to use these roads. They don't allow cyclists to use these roads. There's all these like super cyclists who are like, oh, go ahead, take the lane, stop being a wuss and stop complaining and stuff. They're losers. They need to shut the hell up. So Jane Street under here south of St. Clair, just all the cyclists are riding on the sidewalk. It's completely terrible. This is your only choice of a southern egress. There's the terrible southwestern one. This terrible southern one on Jane, where you don't even want to use this area as a pedestrian. Crossing under this as a pedestrian is about a 5 to 10 minute commitment in huffing fumes and just walking through this. Really, like, it's all honestly, it's just scary. It would be an awesome place to mug somebody if you could stand to hang out there and wait for somebody to walk by, and nobody walks by because it's so shitty, and people just don't walk in and out of this hood except for the extremely poor. And it's really sad to see this this parade of the people who can't afford cars, and so they're walking because they're too scared to bike. They're going to get their groceries with like big carts and frickin' wagons, like the type of wagons that kids use and stuff like that. That's pathetic. It's so pathetic. And even people who have cars, they're like, look, it's still not worth it to drive just the 2 blocks to the grocery store Sorry, I'm trying to filibuster while my computer loads this next segment of map. And I know all these people who do end up driving to get one bag of groceries, driving 4 blocks to get one bag of groceries when the grocery store is about 500 meters away. It's super, super close. They're driving 3 times the distance because they can't walk it because of infrastructure that's designed to sell cars. This is the spot where it should be the best spot to get in and out. This is Runnymede on in the southern end. This is Runnymede just south of St. Clair, and it should be totally awesome, except it's wide enough to admit 2 cars, and the bike lane is just a painted line. And drivers do pass each other going through here. And just north of here, drivers routinely pass each other because you got one driver turning left, you got the other driver deking into the bike lane to pass that other driver. There is nothing here to protect any cyclist from any driver. Nothing. There is no safety provision for cyclists. I mean, I go through here all the time. People go through here all the time on bikes, but not really as many as you'd expect. There's not really that many cyclists using this because it's scary as hell. And meanwhile, the sidewalk's too narrow too, so all they needed to do was, well, of course, widen the sidewalk to include a bike lane, because cyclists don't need 4 meters of clearance, or, 4.5 meters of clearance. So this whole thing of putting cyclists on the road with the drivers, yeah, that's ridiculous. Once you get through here, no matter what way you're going, it's not so bad. Well, it still sucks to be getting further into the neighborhood. You still have to basically cross St. Clair to get into the neighborhood, which sucks, but it's alright. Once you get into the junction here, you're pretty much home free. There's tons of routes like this back route here, through and into and around the junction. But then, of course, in the junction, you're trapped if you want to go northwest, north, northeast, east, west, southwest. And all you can really easily do is go down to Bloor Street, and then on Bloor, you're kind of screwed as a cyclist too. I'll show you the final remaining access points to the hood here on the southeast side. It's basically Kiel, which is terrible, just like Jane. It's basically the same, except there's even less room on the sidewalk for you to ride your bike through or walk your bike through. There's basically not enough room to walk your bike through, and not enough room to, ride your bike fast enough to remain stable and pass pedestrians at a decent, distance. So there is no way to, I'd say, if we define convenience as not inconveniencing strangers and stuff, right? Not having to push strangers out of the way or scare them and stuff, there is no convenient and safe and legal way for any cyclist to go through this thing. So let's review. In the whole neighborhood, we have one access point on the northeast side that is somewhat accessible to cyclists. Of course, to get to it and to use it, you have to go through 2 intersections that are absolutely awful. And then on the southeast side, there's this one way that you can get in and out that's okay. Kiel, like I said, it's garbage. There's this one way that you can get in and out, and it's a surface route. But you have to have elite bike handling skills to be able to cross it. And it's out here, and of course you have to have elite mapping skills. And remember that it's back open again after 10 years of being closed to even find this crossing. But this is the most civilized crossing for cyclists in this whole area. And like I said, you have to really be an elite cyclist to have the skills to cross over this thing without getting caught in the tracks, because it's a rail crossing at an extreme angle, so you have to do this wicked zigzag to get across. So you got to get up to this spot with enough speed that you're ahead of the driver that's tailgating you. You got to be in the very left part of the lane. You got to somehow avoid them trying to pass you on your right, because you're going to slow down unexpectedly so that you can turn right over the tracks, hope that they're not trying to pass you on your right, etc. It's stupid. You have to basically do the same coming the other way. You have to come all through here on the wrong side and then cross over here. It's so stupid. And that's the best rail crossing in and out of this hood, and this hood is surrounded by 4 rail tracks, and so are all of the Toronto hoods. They are all like this. So I'm demonstrating this one, but this is basically what they're all like. They're all total bullshit for cyclists, and we need to strike back. And basically, because cycling safety is a completely non-starter type of topic in terms of Toronto politics, and anything that makes cyclists, that conspicuously makes cyclists safer, is a huge threat to like Ontario's last manufacturing industry. We need to focus on approaching this from an angle of pedestrian safety, because really, like, it's not really like using pedestrian safety as an excuse, because pedestrians are so much more screwed than cyclists are anyway, and they're subject to the exact same type of oppression in terms of the design of the roadways and stuff like that, and the way that traffic laws are not enforced. So it's like, as long as we avoid accidentally introducing design changes that make things worse for cyclists, generally the design changes that would make roads safer for pedestrians are what would make it safer for cyclists as well. Basically, all our sidewalks are too narrow so that we can have 4 lanes on all these roads that don't need 4 lanes. None of these roads need 4 lanes. The crossing times are way too long because we've got all these extra lanes. Meanwhile, there's no space for cyclists. Well, meanwhile, as soon as on basically all these roads, if you just widen the sidewalks enough to accommodate pedestrians, a reasonable amount of pedestrians, if you just widened them so that they would accommodate more than 1 pedestrian on each side of the goddamn road, right? Because right now they accommodate 1 pedestrian per side. If you because there's all this street furniture on all over the sidewalks. There's all these poles and everything. So it's basically room for 1 pedestrian on each side of the road, so that we can have room for 4 cars on the road between those 2 pedestrians. That's totally bogus. So all we need to advocate for is wider sidewalks, and we'll end up with 1 ultra-wide lane in each direction on all these roads instead of 2 narrow lanes in each direction, and we'll end up with a sidewalk that's actually usable. So, I mean, you know, if people end up cycling on the sidewalk, even though there's extra space on the road and, you know, traffic would be slowed down a bit, there'd be, you know, at least room for cyclists to share the sidewalk with pedestrians going through these bridges and tunnels. And in the case of the bridges and tunnels, the sidewalk just needs to be widened to, including a multi-use path for cyclists. But that's not going to happen. There's too much anti-cycling sentiment in municipal politics for that to happen. So we need to settle for underpasses that are like the Ray Road underpass, which is just, you know, like I keep repeating, the magic of each lane being just barely too narrow for 2 cars. Alright guys, I'm done. I just wanted to throw in just a little bit of a reality check here. People are not cycling in Toronto because they can't.